What's up, everyone? Blue Jay here, JNT 250 there, and Clown Fiesta podcast right now. We are back with episode 25, our first episode of 2021. And yes, the LCS is back. I know I am super fired up, as I'm sure most of you are as well. I'm more relieved than anything because I have been bored out of my mind the last 2 months. JNT, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy over the last little while we've been in the off season?
Not too much, Normally when there's a big downtime in League of Legends, you try to pick up some other games. I've been doing a little bit, but I've been playing some Valorant. Got back into Hearthstone actually, but the main thing I've been doing over this extended break is I've been getting back into Pokemon card collecting.
Yeah, let's see.
It's a
let's
banger.
see some of those.
I got these two.
You got them right there with you.
Yep, I got these two bangers today. It's a little Neo Destiny Hollow Dark Espeon. I can't really get it to focus, but there's two nice swirls.
It changes the color of your camera when you do that.
Well, it's kind of like reflecting, and I got this Neo Premium Promo File 2 Reverse Charizard, Japanese. They're nice. There's some bangers right there.
We got a collector. I would show my 1993 Chipper Jones rookie card. However, I think the what's the word? Let's just say people won't be as excited for that one. Anyways, let's get into things. Because the LCS has a new format and kind of a whole new brand, honestly. They've rebranded. Still a lot more of that to come, I believe. I think they have more to announce, but they haven't yet. I'll let you get us started. Where do you want to start with this stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of something that I think came out of left field. I don't think a lot of people were really thinking that the LCS was going to do some big rebrand. I've just now thrown up the new LCS logo on screen there. But I don't know. It just felt like it was summer that kind of came out of nowhere. For the most part, everyone was a bit underwhelmed by it, just for the fact that people didn't like the logo. All they had sort of released was this new logo. A lot of people didn't like it. I don't mind it. I think it's all right. They're trying to, they're trying to make it unique, which I totally get. But it's a little bit confusing in terms of the LCS. I mean, you can tell that it is, but it's not super obvious, which I think is the thing why people didn't necessarily understand it.
Yeah, but I think it takes time for some people to recognize what it is. You know what I'm saying? And to your point, I don't really think people expected the LCS needed a rebrand, but I mean, I think it looks okay. And I also have to say the old logo wasn't exactly amazing either. So it's whatever.
Yeah.
I'm kind of indifferent about it. I'm more interested in what else comes with the rebrand. That's what I'm waiting to see. I don't think you announce a rebrand if all you do is make a new logo. So I feel like they should have more to announce, and I'm looking forward to that. But with the new announcement comes a new LCS format, and I know that's something you and I are both really, really happy with.
Yeah, they pretty much did a massive overhaul of the format to the LCS. A lot of it is sort of stemmed from the meme that Spring Split doesn't matter, created by Doublelift, and it pretty much proved true last year, where Doublelift, wasn't super motivated, didn't take it as seriously as he normally does in the Spring Split of last year with Team Liquid, where they went 7-11 as their record. They finished 9th place, didn't make the playoffs. Doublelift then gets removed from Team Liquid and traded to TSM, to where he, puts the carry pants on a little bit, and TSM wins the split going to Worlds. And we won't talk about the Worlds performances because, yep.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was gonna say. As far as where he finished at the end of summer, yeah, spring didn't matter, but he did not look all that great at the end of summer, and they definitely didn't look good he definitely didn't look good at Worlds. So while yeah, sure, he finished first and whatnot and went as a number 1 seed, you could definitely see the decline in his play. And so I think everyone that is saying Spring Split does matter would point to that, but I don't think there's any argument now whether spring matters. It matters a lot. And I think that's one of the best things about the new LCS format. Actually, before we get into that a little bit, do you want to share with the viewers and listeners a little bit more about what to expect with the new format changes?
Yeah, so basically to sort of eliminate that difference between Spring Split and Summer Split, what they've done is now the regular season matches for the quote-unquote spring and summer splits now counts as one cumulative record. So whatever your record is at the end of the spring split will carry over to the summer split, even though they still are operating with this spring split and summer split titles. So what they've done also for that is they've shortened the spring season, they've made it only 6 weeks of LCS play, following a 6-team playoff, which will determine who the top team is, and that top team will go to MSI as the North American representative. And they've now have a longer summer season where they're introducing an additional head-to-head match between all teams. So normally the way it would work is in Spring Split, you would play each team twice in the season, and then obviously you double that because there's a spring and the summer season. Now what they've done is you will now play each team a total of 5 times in the entirety of the year. So it gives us more LCS games to watch. In that sense, since there's more games, it can give us, a bit of a better representation of the team's overall strength. Some teams can be really hot in spring and then sort of, go on a big decline in summer. We saw that with Cloud9. And on the flip side, we can see teams like Golden Guardians who may have a much weaker spring split and really sort of ramped it up towards the end of summer.
Or Team Liquid, right? Like they were a huge turnaround, right?
Exactly.
And the one way of looking at this is 40% of the regular season games are in spring, 60% are in summer. So it is a little bit weighted more towards summer, which to me is a good thing because that just makes it that like the final playoff picture will be more representative of how good teams are in summer than in spring. So I think that's really good. But with the whole spring doesn't matter conversation that we had last year, I want to point out that this year, not only does spring matter, but it matters more than summer. And the reason I argue that is because spring will qualify you for MSI and Worlds, whereas the summer will only qualify you for Worlds, right? So I could definitely see a world where people will start to say, actually, even though there are fewer games in spring, it actually matters more how you do in spring than it does in summer.
I didn't actually know that. So if you go to MSI, you qualify for Worlds in the spring split?
No, but because your games of spring count towards your final record at the end of summer, like your spring games count for if you qualified to MSI, but they also count for if you qualified to Worlds,
yeah. Well,
right?
that's just an effect of
summer,
everything counting as one.
Right, but the summer, those games don't count towards MSI because MSI's already happened. So you could obviously argue that the spring games matter even more, which is really interesting. Kind of a flip there as to which split matters more. And that's the other thing too. Spring split, it's still called spring split. Even though it's one long season, they decided to keep the name spring split and summer split. They all culminate into one by the end of the year.
Yeah, the only thing that I really didn't like about this whole format change is they actually decided to keep the same playoff format as this new playoff format they introduced last summer season with an 8-team playoff doing the losers bracket. And I think most people can agree that that format didn't help in any way, and it just kind of felt like there was an excess of meaningless games in terms of there were clear teams that were not at the level of the rest of the playoff teams and instantly got, smashed 3-0. Like for example, 100 Thieves and Dignitas were the 7th and 8th place teams, and they didn't look in the same, league as the rest of the playoff teams, even the ones who were 5-6.
So here's what I'm going to say to that, because I do agree that most of those games they felt like a formality. I don't think that they should have felt that way. You and I were very critical of the drafting and just who was playing for those 7 and 8 teams, right? Like
true.
It felt like some of the decisions that were being made those series not really count, when in fact I think they should have, and we should have seen better performances out of those teams. Especially, we went on about how much we thought Lorlo should have been starting. He wasn't starting, and it just looked really bad for Viper in the top lane. So like that's just an example of like things that could have made those series look different. I would say I would be okay with them trying this for another couple of years. If year over year we see 7 and 8 just drop out immediately in the bracket, I wouldn't be upset with them nullifying 7 and 8 and going with a 6-team bracket. But for now, I'm okay with them actually going back and giving it another shot anyways.
Yeah, I think for me, if they wanted for sure to include, like, to expand the playoffs at least, I would have only done it to include the 7th-seeded team. Like, I wouldn't include an 8th. I feel like 8th
is NFL?
Yeah, pretty much what the NFL has done this season, where they now have 7 teams in each conference for the playoffs. I think that if you are going to expand the playoffs, 8 teams is too many, but if you do want to do it like 7, you kind of just have to do it at 7.
Could you explain what that looks like? Because most people would hear 7 teams. How do you do a 7-team bracket? Can you explain how the NFL did it for playoffs?
Yeah, what the NFL did was if you were the team, if you were the first seeded team, you got to buy, and pretty much then it would be like highest remaining seed plays lowest seed. So 2 would play 7, 3 would play 6, 4 would play 5. The only thing with that is you'd have to find some way to add double elimination to it, because in the NFL there is no double elimination. It's just you win, you're in; you lose, you're out. Obviously, I think you could find some way to be able to do that, but just for my opinion, I think having an extra team and it being the 8th place team, that team does not deserve to be in the playoffs. If you're an 8th place team and over the course of 45 games, you are the 8th place team, I don't think it should be in there at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand where that sentiment comes from. I totally get that. What haven't we touched on yet for the new format? Did we say that whoever's wins at the end of spring goes to MSI? Did we talk about that yet?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and then did we talk about the lock-in tournament yet? Because that's the new thing,
Well,
right?
I was just going to add 2 small things just
Go for it.
before in terms of the summer playoff format. They did 2 little tweaks just to as some slight improvements to some of the problems that they had last year. What they're now doing is side selection is now being given priority to upper bracket teams that end up falling down to the lower bracket. So, for example, if you start off in the lower bracket, meaning you're a 7th or 8th team, or maybe you're a 5, 6 seed that dropped down earlier into the bracket, you're most likely not going to be having side selection at the start of the series for game 1, because it's going to be favored to those teams who did finish higher in the regular season. Because there was a whole discussion about what's the point of like being in the upper bracket if you drop down, if you don't even get side selection and stuff like that. So that's what they did to fix that. And one other thing they did was they've now set it up so rematches between teams will now occur later in the bracket. So people remember last year, TSM versus Golden Guardians played initially right at the start of the playoffs, where Golden Guardians 3-0 TSM. And then pretty much right after that, they had a rematch where TSM ended up pulling off the reverse sweep 3-2. They
Was
basically
it the next
now
week?
it was the
like
next,
week
yeah,
after?
it was the week after. But the
Yeah,
way
that's
they've set
messed
it
up.
up now is rematches will happen later in the bracket. So I don't know exactly, but for example,
Yeah.
if this situation would occur again, they wouldn't play each other until a couple weeks later.
It seems like it would give teams more time to prep for what they had just seen the week prior. That's what it sounds like.
Hmm.
Like you do, but like TSM would have done a bunch of prep for Golden Guardians, and then they have to play them the following week. It's like you can't really adjust. But by giving them what sounds like probably an extra week, you would have a little bit more time to adjust. I don't think I don't think that makes a huge change, but I mean, it is. I think it's a good change nonetheless.
Yeah, I think for the most part, all the format changes that they are implementing are good. I definitely think the
Yeah.
LCS needed a change in terms of being able to motivate players a little bit more, especially earlier on in the season, and making your spring split record a little bit more rewarding for those teams who,
Yes.
they perform very well in the spring split. And let's say they do have, a bit of a downturn in summer, they're not as affected.
Well, and to me, that was one of the biggest things that we noticed last year is I think spring of last year was probably the worst we have seen the LCS in comparison to all the other major regions. It felt like the LCS got off to a very slow start with some of the motivation issues. And I mean, we could talk about Doublelift and his motivation issues all day, but that's really what it was, what it came down to. And I see someone in live chat talking about COVID. That was another issue that we saw was different as well, right? Like people weren't in their regular environments. And while I don't think that's going to change this year, it certainly was something that pushed the LCS towards not looking as good as it had looked in past years. Not that it looked amazing in other years, but it definitely looked worse last year. And I think that getting people going, getting these teams on the right start means making these games count for more earlier in the season. I think that will help the LCS in the long run.
Yeah, definitely agree. Just quickly,
Let's talk
we are gonna.
lock-in.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna touch on it a lot more later. But another format change they added was this new lock-in tournament that is going to be happening before the spring regular season starts. If I remember correctly, if you win the lock-in tournament, you get $150,000 to your organization and also $150,000 to donate to a charity of your choice.
I think
And
it's 50 grand for the charity. I think it's 50
okay,
grand.
well, money to charity is good.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and lastly, I believe you win the lock-in tournament or you perform well in the lock-in tournament, you get side selection advantage for the now introduced 5th head-to-head match between teams during the seasonal games.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know about that, or if I did, I forgot. Anyways, so that's
Hmm.
cool. But yeah, the lock-in tournament I think is a really good idea. I am worried that it will get stale over time, just because it doesn't have a really strong effect on. Well, let's be honest, it has no effect on where you finish in the standings, right? So to me, what I'm afraid of is that this will be the next thing to not matter, right? Like I'm afraid that lock-in tournament doesn't matter is going to become the new meme. However, because it's new and because it's fresh, it's hella hype. Like I can't wait for this thing. I think it's going to be freaking awesome. And one thing that I also think it will help do is it will help establish a meta. I think that that's another thing that maybe it stops regions from getting into the swing of things, is that like the first month or so requires teams to start to develop a meta. I think this tournament could do that. But I would also like to, because I said it's possible that the lock-in tournament doesn't matter. Maybe, and I think this was a point you made, J&T, was maybe because it doesn't matter, teams kind of hide their picks and stuff like that, right? Maybe no one wants to show what they think is meta, and if this tournament turns out to not matter, it could just be a huge waste of time, right? And become a meme tournament.
Yeah, you kind of teams will probably have to find the balance of like if they think it's worth it to try hard in this tournament and go out and win it, whether it's for the money, for the side selection, for the charity, or if it's more worth it to save their potential strategies for the regular season matches, which do count, in the long run for playoffs and for, I guess at that point, like Worlds implications.
Yeah, and I remember Travis Gafford saying something along the lines of like the 25,000 that you would win. I think he mentioned that it's a red herring, if I remember quoting him properly. Um, I sort of agree, but I don't completely. I think that when you say that, you're looking at the people like your Bjergsons, your double ifs. I know they're not in the league anymore, but players of that stature that are already absolutely cleaning up on cash. For someone who makes towards the bottom, like the minimum salary, which I think in the league is still 75K per year, a $25,000 raise is a lot of money, man. So there's a lot of incentive for the lower paid players in the league to want to win this thing. While I do get where he's coming from the like this is a red herring, I kind of agree, but I don't completely. I think it depends on the player for how they would look at how much $25,000 is really worth to them. I do think that having that money incentive does make it a little bit better. Let's say.
Yeah, I think it gives that baseline like reason for people to try. Money is a good motivator for the majority of people.
Yeah, definitely. And even if you're making 500K a year, I mean, 25 grand's always pretty nice. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, so, and also you have to remember that these are guys that like competing, right? Like you play because you want to win and you hate losing. Regardless of whether the prize money is there or not, it wouldn't surprise me if everyone really wants to win this thing.
Yeah, you play to win the
And
game.
there's pride there, right? So, anyways, we'll see how this tournament goes on. I don't really have much more to say about it. I'm really excited for it. I think all the format changes make sense, and I think that this year of LCS will be a lot better than 2020.
Agree. We're gonna move on to our tier lists now. So what myself and Blue Jay have done is we have organized all the LCS teams into tiers from S to D. Just to preface it, Blue Jay has not seen my tier list. I have obviously seen his to be able to pull it up on stream, but we do have quite a lot of differences. Well, we have differences, so I think we'll have a lot to discuss here. I'll throw them up on screen now.
Yours. Let's go so that we're not all over the place. Let's just go. We'll go based off yours. We'll follow
Yeah,
yours,
yeah.
and we'll talk a little bit about every single team.
So they're up on screen now. What do you think? What do you think?
I don't know. Like, it's not that crazy to me. Like, it's like, yeah, there are differences, but I think they're pretty minimal. Is there something crazy that I'm missing?
No, that's what I meant. Like, yes, they're different because like teams are in different categories, but it kind of follows the same-ish structure.
If people are wondering why we're so like, are they the same? Are they not the same? Usually, whenever we do this, J&T and I always have like almost the exact same shit. And we're always going like, why are we even doing this if we always put up the same damn thing? So I'm glad that for once there's a little bit of parity there. Like it's not all the same. While it is similar, I don't think the only way it would be super dissimilar is if we were actually trying to make it different, which I think what's the point, right? But yeah, anyways, let's get into it. So are we starting with Golden Guardians then?
Yeah, we'll start with Golden Guardians because I got them. And you got them at the bottom.
Where do you want me to start?
No, you can start. You can start.
Okay, so I have some good and bad things to say about Golden Guardians. Unfortunately, all the bad things are to do with the roster, and all the good is to do with management. So let's just go with the roster for now. So the bad is I don't think this is an LCS level team. Like, okay, if we're let's start with the roster. Just for those that don't know, I'll go top, jungle, mid, bot, and support in that order. So we got Niles top, Iconic, Ablaze Olive, Stixay, and Newbie. And when I look at these players, I'm thinking either they haven't had any success at the LCS level, or it's been a long time since we've seen it. And that's what I'm afraid of. It's not that I think all these players are bad, but like, okay, let's talk about Niles and Iconic, for example. They've had great success at the collegiate level, and their teammate or their well, I don't want to say ex-teammates because they were just teammates playing for Maryville, if I'm not mistaken. So they come in with some synergy, and that's great, and they played great there. So there's some synergy, but having success at the collegiate level that's not enough for me to have confidence in your team. And we know that the Golden Guardians were significantly impeded, maybe is the right word. I don't know. They don't have a lot of cash flow to be spending on players, and this roster does look like a budget roster. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, what's his name? Sorry, Hunter Lee. That's the Golden Guardians guy.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
so
the president of esports operations or some crap.
Yeah, well, he's done a couple interviews, discussing the whole Golden Guardians roster and what happened in the offseason with them, trading away the majority of their roster to 100 Thieves, so we will talk about later. But he was sort of talking about how, their organization believes that they can, develop and foster talent, how they have done with Closer, Huhi, and FBI in terms of getting players to perform at their peak and really getting the most out of their players. And while that is respectable and admirable, it can be very difficult, and we'll have to see if they're able to repeat this. But like you mentioned, success at the collegiate level is just not the same to LCS level talent. We've seen in other regions, for example, like in Europe, the LPL and the LCK, their academy leagues, or in case of the LEC, their national leagues, are, I think, a much better indication of skill level between players in, the respective leagues in that region. Very commonly do we see LCK academy players or even LCK trainee players step up and move up to LCK starting rosters, and we've seen a ton of success with various players like that. In DRX last year, we had Pioshik and Keria. SKT, they brought up a ton of academy and trainee players this year to their roster. Last year, they had Kana. The list, goes on and on. We saw that with the whole Griffin roster when they first started dominating the LCK, and now even with Damwon, they're the best team in the world. So going from the NA, sort of amateur and lower levels, it's nothing like in these other regions, and I think the Golden Guardians roster will struggle massively out the gate.
Well, and okay, I talked about Niles and Iconic again. It's not. It doesn't end with them. Ablaze Olive has been a guy. He's been in academy for some time now, and I would describe him as a serviceable mid laner at the academy level. He wasn't absolutely popping off. He wasn't running it down. But if you've got, I'd maybe say maybe a little bit above average mid laner.
I would put him top 4.
Okay, sure. But how are you going to plug that into the LCS and see success, right? There's a reason we both have them at the bottom, because this guy's got to now go up against guys like Perks and Power of Evil and Jensen. I'm really worried for him. I don't think that there's a lot of potential for him to pop off in the LCS, and it doesn't end there. Stixay, when was the last time we've seen Stixay play at a high level?
Season 7.
5 years ago? Okay, 3. Well, I guess that's 4 years ago.
4 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, a long freaking time. And I'm not saying that his career is over, but I am worried about if he can really pull it together, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. And then you got Newbie. I don't really have much to say about Newbie. I can't pretend that I've been spam watching the Latin America region. I'm not gonna lie to you and been I got all the spark notes on Newbie's performances. I don't. But even if he absolutely pops off, I don't see the rest of the lineup being able to play to that level if he even does. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I have no clue who he is, to be honest. One thing I do think that Golden Guardians does have going for them is they do have Anero coaching, who I do think is a really good coach in terms of, like they've said they want to do, fostering and getting the best out of their players. Anero has done a very solid job with subpar teams talent-wise. He used to coach Echo Fox, and he sort of brought that team into playoff contention. And Season 8, he's been coaching Golden Guardians now, and we saw what an amazing job they did at the end of last year. So if anyone is to get the best out of these players and potentially get them like maybe middle of the pack in LCS or like 7th, 8th for summer playoffs, I think it'll be Anero.
See, and that's where I say like all the good things I have to say about this org come from the management side, because you're exactly right. They've been really good at developing talent, and not just developing, but also finding the right talent to develop. Like these were the guys that started bringing over the Oceanic players, like FBI, or even finding Closer in the Turkish league. Like they've been really good at finding these players. We were all convinced his career was pretty much done.
Yeah.
He made the role swap. He wasn't that great of a support, and then last year by the end of summer, he was, I don't know, or they were rather, one of the best bot lanes, FBI and Huhi, if not the best bot lane by the end of summer. So you really have to give props to them. And the other thing that I want to give them props for as well is what I hear is that they were highly involved in some of the recommendations that came with the new LCS format. So just another way that like this Golden Guardians like organization has had a huge impact on the LCS, like positive impact. They were also the ones to start in-houses last year. And while, yes, I know there's some memes around in-houses and not everything's perfect, you see a lot of good things come from this org. So like, while the team does look doom and gloom, I think that's more just because they don't have a budget, and we all know that. But from the management side, they're very, very solid there. And the last thing that I'm going to say is, let's say they do turn this roster into a good LCS team. I don't see how Golden Guardians is then going to be able to hold on to their management, their manager, their GM, anybody that develops their talent, because clearly they can't afford the players. You would think that someone like Cloud9 or TL or TSM would come in and just scoop all these guys that are good at finding and developing talent, right? So that's where I'm really worried for the Golden Guardians organization. Is I don't doubt that their staff is able to find and develop talent, but I do doubt that the Golden Guardians can afford to keep them there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the Golden Guardians management is kind of carrying them a little bit. We'll have to see if that remains true going into this season. I say we move on to Dignitas next.
Let's do it.
With the new logo, with the new Dignitas logo, they're back to the little guy you like so much.
Let's. Oh, I freaking love this new logo. Well, it's I guess it's not a new logo. It's like it's a new version of the old logo. It's better than the freaking owl. Okay.
I've now just realized that the owl logo is in the tier lists, but
whoops,
I couldn't change that.
Yeah, I don't really care. Honestly, that new logo is very, very nice. I like it a lot. I'm going to be getting myself some Dig get up at some point. I don't know when, but definitely I love the new sweater that they came out with. They haven't shown their freaking jerseys yet. We'll talk a little bit more about jerseys later. That's some foreshadowing for you. Okay, let's get into the roster though.
Okay.
Roster. Give me some roster talk.
Well, so their roster for 2021 is Fate God top lane, Dardoch jungle, Sligo mid lane, Neo, who was formerly Asta, is their ADC, and Aframu support. For me, Dignitas, along with Golden Guardians, where I just think were the two absolute worst teams in the offseason. You know, Dignitas, they did a respectable job sort of clawing their way back into the playoffs when playoffs did come around. I believe, what did they started out 0-8 or 0-10? 0-8?
Right. They did start 0-8 or something like that. I forgot about that. I forgot that they started 0 for a lot.
I believe they started. I think it was 0 for 8, and then they finished the end of the season going 6-4, if I remember that correctly.
I think you might be right, and that's why I said like this team wasn't that bad, and like that's exactly why I said like the 8-team playoff format shouldn't have looked as bad as it did, because I thought that this team was a contender. But anyways.
Yeah, well, pretty much everything that this 2020 Dignitas roster had going for them, they have gotten rid of now. They no longer have Johnson at the ADC position, who was their best player by far. Maybe not by far. Afro was doing really well. Afro was doing well. Yeah. Okay. So he was their best player for sure. We discussed it episode after episode last year, talking about how Dignitas was 3-1 in the regular season when they had Lorlo playing top lane, but they just continued to roll with Viper. I believe Lorlo is no longer on the team. I think he went to a
No, I
different
think
account.
he's Academy. I think
Is
he's
he really?
Academy. I think
Okay,
he's still there.
Lorlo's gonna be in there then at some
Don't quote
point.
me on that now, but I something's telling me he's still there. I thought I saw that
Okay,
recently. Don't
maybe.
quote me on that though.
Well, my point is Lorlo should be the starting top laner for this team. They held on to Dardoch in the jungle. I think Dardoch did an all right job last year. He was a little bit coin flippy, but the way that I see it is, it was probably there were not any better options than Dardoch. So I think holding on to him, like I said, is the best option available. They have Soligo mid lane. We've seen him in the LCS once before. Obviously, he was kind of just thrown into the deep end there after who he had gone to 100 Thieves to play mid lane and did a poor job. Soligo was the academy mid laner at the time, just got thrown in, and there was a bunch of memes around Soligo. Everyone kind of knew that he was the worst mid laner in the league. And their bot lane, Neo, I would say, is a significant downgrade over Aframu. A significant
Over
downgrade
Johnson.
over Johnson. Basically, they just didn't do anything.
Yeah, well, and again, this could be one of those teams. This would never it never came out that we're under the NBA, like it's an NBA team, so we're low on budget, so we can't afford players. That didn't come out nearly as much as the Golden Guardians one did, but I'm sure that's probably the same reasoning. If it's not, then I don't know what the hell you're doing. We harped on them so much for getting rid of Johnson, and I mean we still are for good reason. We think that he was their best player. But yeah, no, I got them finishing towards the bottom of the standings just because they were an 8th place team by the end of summer, and to me they got worse. Now, what I do want to say is I don't want to be putting words in his mouth, but I think it was Kobe. It was on Kobe's stream. I think he was saying that he saw some good things out of Fake God and Soligo at the academy level, and that they were starting to perform a lot better than he had previously seen. If it wasn't Kobe, I apologize. It might have been somebody else. But the point is that it was an LCS analyst I know for sure that was saying that he saw better things out of these two players. And so I want to go into this season open minded to see, like, not having preconceived notions of what to expect out of these guys. With that said, if you're putting them in a tier list, I need to see more before I put them any higher in my tier list. And so that's why I threw them in C.
Yeah, I kind of just have them grouped. Like the way that I see the D tier of my tier list is pretty much you don't have a star player and you don't really seem to have a vision for your team. I would say the Golden Guardians organization, they have a vision. They want to try and foster young talent and see where it goes, but the overall team, like, it's super unknown.
Well,
And
I want to challenge that a little bit because I don't want to call Afro a superstar anymore, but he had a really good summer split, man, where I thought that he was one of the best supports. And so I don't think it's totally fair to say you have no stars on this team because the way we've seen him most recently, I thought Afro was one of the best carries on that team, even in the support role. There was games that were so heavy and it was really heavily carried by the bot lane. Afro in particular, that Blitzcrank was insane. So I wanna give a little bit more props to Afro. I don't want to say there's no stars on this roster with Afro still playing there, even though over the last couple of years we've seen a slight decline. I think the last split we saw a significant resurgence in his performance.
yeah, for me, it's kind of just like for me, Johnson was the best laning ADC in the league last year. Pretty much, for people who don't know, our whole group, one of our friends, Scott Johnson, is just like they play against him all the time in solo queue, and they've been saying for like 2 years that this guy is like future LCS star, which he now is. And to get rid of Johnson and to replace somebody, I'm sorry to call him average at best, Neo,
That's true though.
I don't think that they're gonna have that same bot lane dynamic in that
Yeah.
they will be able to play the game through bot lane and accrue advantages in bot lane just because like their laning will just be worse. I hope that Afro can continue his strong performances from summer split to this next spring split, but I just don't see it happening with an overall much weaker team. It puts a lot more pressure on him. And if the focus is going to be around Aframu, I'm sorry, but I don't trust Aframu to carry the game for me.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that. Yeah. I think you need more than one guy to be able to carry a team, and
Yeah.
Anyways, no, pretty much everything you said I agree with for the most part. The only other thing I want to shine a light on is they haven't announced their coaching yet. So that's something we're still waiting to find out who their coach is. I believe that it is known. I don't think that they've announced it though. I think they know their coach already. Just they're not.
I would
I just want
assume
to make.
so.
I just want to make sure people know they're not scrambling for a coach at the last second.
I would
That's all.
hope that they would have a coach when the LCS starts in 4 days.
Yeah.
So I would hope
Well,
they would have that figured out.
if they don't, that would be. Anyways, I'm pretty sure it's no longer invert though. I think they said goodbye to him. Don't remember exactly. Well, I mean, if it was still invert, why would we be looking at an empty thing right now, right? It would still say. So, anyways, coaching staff should be announced really soon. So yeah, who's
Yeah,
next?
I say we go into Immortals. The last of the D tier for myself. Just to remind everybody, their roster is currently sitting at Revenge in the top lane, Xerxes coming over from EU in the jungle, Insanity mid lane, Raze and Destiny, two OCE players in their bot lane, and Gyoto as head coach, former Schalke and Origin head coach.
Yeah, for me, I'm the guy to look at is Xerxes. Okay, he didn't have the greatest summer split. I don't think this guy's done, man. In spring for the LEC, for those that don't watch, he was one of the best junglers, probably a top 3 or top 4 jungle in the LEC. He was very, very good. I'm waiting to see his Gragas. He's a very good Gragas player, makes a lot of plays happen, and I think that that's something the LCS is lacking a little bit of aggro. We need a little bit more aggro and some playmaking, and I think Xerxes is going to bring that for this team, and so that's why I put them a tier above the bottom tier. With that said, there's still some unproven guys on this roster like Revenge. Revenge kind of gives me the same vibes as a Blaze Olive, maybe even a little bit worse than a Blaze Olive though, because he wasn't exactly tearing it up in Academy. I thought that he was an average player at best, and so. If I'm gonna say the argument for a Blaze Olive, I think it applies to a Revenge. If you're an average player in Academy, what world are you gonna start popping off in the LCS? That's my worry for that guy, anyways.
Yeah, I was initially hesitant to actually put Immortals sort of in the D tier, but the reason that I did so is I definitely agree with you that Xerxes, he's not done. I think he still is a solid player. Origin as a whole, that entire roster had a huge just like crumbling in the summer season. They finished dead last in the LEC. Although they still had some very solid starting players on their team like Alfari and Upset. The rest of their team was heavily underperforming.
Nuke Duck looked really bad.
And Jack Troll or Destiny, and then when they subbed in Jack Troll,
Jack Troll was trolling, man.
Yeah.
I thought that I didn't think that was a good swap. I thought Destiny was playing a lot better. But anyway.
Yeah, but my main reasoning, although I do think Xerxes is going to be solid, I do think that this Immortals roster will suffer similar to the previous Immortals roster where they had a strong jungler in Xmithy, but very weak individual laners and players surrounding him. I don't think that Xerxes is going to be able to completely 1v9 the game. I do think that jungle last season, and especially moving into this season, is still going to be heavily played around your mid-jungle synergy and being able to get advantages in mid lane or in top lane, and then in tandem, working with the jungler to expand those advantages to the rest of the map. And I don't think that Insanity is that type of player who will be able to just sort of elevate Xerxes and help this team perform. I do have high hopes for Insanity. I think we can both agree that we actually really liked Insanity in terms of his
juice, man.
Insanity got the juice. That's a good meme, by the way. We can both agree that Insanity did look like he looked promising in his first season. He had a pretty wide champion pool. He seemed to, he had a few big plays, but he also had a lot of big missteps, especially in the early game with his laning. I remember an AP Cog game that he had where I think he died 4 times in 10 minutes or something like that. But I think
will be fun to watch, man.
Oh, for sure.
So aggro.
This is one of the teams in the LCS where I do think they have the most to gain in terms of their players stepping up their performance, some unknown talent coming in that could be a lot better than initially thought, like Revenged and like Raze. I do think Raze was a solid player on the World Championship stage in the play-in tournament. He was, I think he was Legacy's best player, I would say. Him and their jungler, Bopip, were I think their two best players. And I was happy to hear that he did get a spot in the LCS. I wasn't sure if it was going to be on a bottom tier LCS team or maybe a top academy team, but I am happy that he's here and we will get to see him. But I do think that this team has the most to gain in terms of their performances, because I think if this team can sort of mesh and play well, obviously, they have the sort of roster and jungler specifically with Xerxes to do that.
Yeah, and I want to point out, like, clearly you and I are a little bit more excited for this team than we are Dignitas. But
Yeah,
I
like,
wanna
get
look at
Dignitas
our-
out of here. I don't want to see Fake God again. I don't want to see Saligo again. I don't want to see Asta. Like, give me the
I'm
juice.
okay with it.
Give me the
Yeah.
juice.
Insanity got the juice. But no, but seriously though, I think there's a little bit more of a reason to be more excited about this team. It's not so much that we think they're way better than Dignitas, it's that their ceiling is a little bit higher. And so if people are wondering, well, you guys both have them in the same spot of your tier list. It's like, it's not that we think that, they're much, much better of a team, but you can actually see the path of where they're trying to go with this. Whereas Dignitas, it's more like, didn't these guys already kind of get their shot and this is what you came up with? It's like, so that's where the difference is for me. But yeah, and again, talking about Insanity and his aggressive play, like I said before, that fits really well with Xerxes, who is aggressive and makes a lot of plays as well. That's another thing to be excited for this roster as well. So yeah, there we go. You got Insanity.
I had to put the meme up there.
With the juice. Nice.
Okay, are we gonna move on now?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Let's go next.
I say we go CLG next. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I thought you go ahead.
No, I just you go first with CLG here.
CLG. Okay, where do I want to start? So, okay, let's say this. I don't think that they have a roster full of superstars, but I'm really happy with what this team did from last split or last year. They got 3 new players, and I think every single one of those players is an upgrade from their previous player. Yeah. So if you look at, we got Finn in the top lane, Broxa in the jungle, Pobelter mid, Wild Turtle AD carry, and Smoothie support. Just one more time, Broxa. Yeah, no, I think Finn is better than Name. I can picture his face. It's not coming to me.
Oh, Ruin.
Ruin, thank you.
He
Ruin
fucking
struggled.
ruined that org.
Yeah, well, I mean, he struggled a lot, let's say. And then obviously we also saw what Wiggly did in the jungle. Wiggly was
Avert your eyes, please. Avert your eyes.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. I know a lot of people are going to look at Broxa and say Broxa had a really bad 2020. I don't think he had a really bad 2020. I really don't. I just don't think he was playing on the same level as his teammates, and therefore it made him look a lot worse than he actually is. I don't think Broxa is a bottom tier jungler. I think that we can see a little bit of resurgence. I hope to God his visa comes in, man. I was watching, for those that don't know, I was watching Healthy Gamer. It was an interview recently that came out with Broxa. And he was saying in the video that came out on January 7th. Now, I don't know if it was recorded on January 7th, but the video came out on January 7th with him saying, I'm still waiting for my visa to be approved. And that's where I kind of went, Monka S, like, not again. Anyways, if it happens again, it happens again. And then Wild Turtle's the other player. I think Wild Turtle had a pretty good 2020, and that's just an upgrade over Stixay. So even though CLG I don't think is the best team on paper, they certainly got better, and they certainly showed that they're not happy with finishing 10th. They want to look for players that can actually perform, and I think that this is a middle of the pack team in the LCS.
Yeah, the way that I'm viewing CLG is I'm comparing them a little bit to the Immortals in the sense that I just think they're like a better version of the Immortals roster. Their players are proven, they're a little bit better, but I think they do still suffer from the fact that they don't have a carry player. And what I mean by that is if you just take a look at their play styles from like last year, Finn was, when he was performing very well on Rogue, he was being a tank weak side player, and when he got put on carry matchups in the top lane, he would often lose those, and he would often end up very behind early on in the lane, and that was a major reason for their downfall.
He was a good Kled player, though. I'd say that. Like, that Kled is that's his bread and butter. I don't know if he was a Kled one trick, a la Sketcher. Shout out to Sketcher, but he plays a lot of Kled, and so he performed pretty well on Kled. Other than that, I do agree with you though.
Yeah. Then, like, kind of moving on to Pobelter, he hasn't been known as a carry player, and he is sort of I don't want to say supportive style mid. but he kind of just plays the meta champions. And while that's okay, you do need someone to really be able to pop off. And I view that the same way in their bot lane with Wild Turtle and Smoothie. One of the reasons why I thought Wild Turtle was performing so well in the 2020 season was because he had Ignar, this super aggressive, likes to skirmish, likes to pick early, fighting champion spot, or plays like the peeling support role for other players to carry on that team. And I do think this team is sort of going to suffer from like a lot of like, I don't know how to say it exactly, but like I don't feel like with this CLG team, like a lot of plays are going to be made. Like I feel like this is going to be a pretty reactive and slow team. Like I don't see this team like snowballing through the early game, like unless we do see the old Broxa. And that's what I do think this team has going for them, is maybe that was the Team Liquid playstyle. They wanted Broxa to come in and just be the Xmithy role, but they thought that he could do it at a better level, and that didn't really happen. And who knows, maybe he's going to the CLG roster and he's going to be the old EU Broxa. We're going to see a shit ton of Lee Sin. We're going to see Elise. We're going to see these early game champions where he can make an impact and get ahead. But I think if we see the current Broxa where he is playing a more supportive-ish role, I feel like this team is going to suffer from inaction.
Yeah, I want to see Broxa invading in the jungle again. That's vintage Broxa playing the Lee Sin. He's going in. And that's what we want to see back a little bit more aggro. I don't really have anything more to say about CLG. I'm happy because I think that what they did with their offseason was probably one of the best scenarios available to them.
Yeah, they went from like I don't know. I'm trying to like make a comparison here, but it was just like the least desirable place to go probably, because like CLG has just been a shit show for like the last 2 years, minus that one decent split they had. But like you said, I think they actually did a decent job with acquiring solid players that, like I don't think this CLG team is going to be a bottom team. I don't think they'll finish in the bottom two, but I don't necessarily think this team has the highest of ceilings.
Yeah, that's fair. I could see that. Oh God, if this CLG team fails, man.
I just like
the flame that this org is going to get. I'm also committing to this. I am cheering for CLG as much as I can. As long as there's not well, I mean, that's warranted. As long as I don't have to hear them come out, no offense to Weldon again, but if I mean Weldon's gone.
Oh God,
right?
stop talking about that guy.
If I have to hear another CLG staff member come out and say that while they finish last place, if I hear a coach come out and say we expect to be number one next split, I'm ditching CLG. But until that happens, I'm going to cheer for CLG as much as I possibly can. I want to see this org do well. I don't want them to go to the waste. I don't got words for this, but you know what I'm trying to say. I want to see this team be a team again.
I hope
a decent team. That's all I want to see.
My hope for CLG this season is that they make it through the spring split without getting flamed by Freak on the broadcast. That should be their goal. It happened like 3 times last split. Last season. They were fucking hilarious. But dude, if they can avoid
if Freak flames them once, we got to get a Freak flame counter, or even Freak Flame is actually some of the best flame because it's usually pretty freaking funny.
Okay, you kind of just froze for a sec there, but I think everyone heard your point though. Freak Flame. Okay. Freak Flame counter. We got that.
Okay, cool. All right.
Okay. Okay. Moving on. I guess we will do FlyQuest next.
FlyQuest, I'll let you start us off with this one.
Okay. FlyQuest had the what I call it, like the biggest. Yeah, it was definitely the biggest roster shuffle because they have an entire new roster. None of their old roster is together, and the majority of them are on actually separate teams. But this is probably the roster in the LCS where I have no idea where to place them, and I feel like their performance, it could be literally anywhere from like 3rd to 10th potentially.
So many people have said the same thing, and I think they're right. Like there's such a high ceiling and such a low floor because you've seen so much good out of this roster, but it's like if we look at the guys like Palafox and like Diamond, like again, going back to the academy argument, you could pop off an academy, but that doesn't mean you're going to pop off at the LCS level.
Yeah,
they looked really freaking good in academy, so there's a reason to be excited for these guys, right?
Yeah, like if you just look at the star potential on this team, they have Licorice and Johnson, 2 players who I think most people would put as top 3 in their role last year. I don't think there's no doubt. To me, there's not a ton of argument there. You even look at a guy like Jose Dioto, who did have a very strong performance on the World Championship stage. although like yes, he did have a strong performance, but you do have to take into consideration he was playing other wildcard region teams, and when it came to the best of 3 that they played against LGD, they got dog-eared. I know that they beat LGD in their first go around, but holy moly, Jose Diodo got slapped up, and you kind of got to wonder if that could be telling for this season.
Okay, I'm gonna play the pessimist on this one just for a little bit, just to kind of play devil's advocate. So I had them right smack in the middle of my my tier list, so that's clearly where I think they should fall. But if I'm being a little bit pessimistic, I do want to say that I don't think people remember all of his performances, Jose Diodo I'm talking about here, at Worlds. Because to me, I thought he had a really rough start to Worlds.
Oh, I agree.
Now, he had some really good carry performances, and I think those were the performances that everyone hung on to. But I don't know if it was his first game or his second game. He was doing nothing. Like his team is fighting all over the map, and he's AFK farming and not getting a lead. And that was something that I really hung on to. I couldn't let that go. I couldn't forget about that. And so while we saw some really good things out of Jose Diodo, I think there's reasonable hype behind him. I think we need to be a little bit more realistic and say like, well, not all of his performances were that pop-off worthy. And so that's why that's just another reason for me why they fit they could be so good but so bad, because I think we saw a little bit of everything from him on the world stage, and that's why like I'm not as hyped as most people would be specifically for Jose Diodo.
Yeah, I definitely am kind of in agreement with you about the Jose Diodo thing. Just I do remember what happened. Rainbow Seven, they were 0-2 in their first 2 games on the first day of play-ins, and I think most people at that point kind of labeled them as the worst team in the play-in tournament because of how bad that they did look.
They looked pretty bad.
Following that, though, they did actually get 2 wins, upsetting LGD and kind of moving on to the best of 5, elimination bracket, to which they got absolutely destroyed by LGD. But Jose Diodo did have some good performances, and it's hard to exactly
pretty good.
yeah, it's hard to exactly place him because of how hot and cold he was in these games. But my reasoning for having FlyQuest not necessarily smack dab in the middle, but a little bit on the lower end, is just for the fact that I think mid jungle is their weakest positions. In terms of talking about like Palafox and Diamond from the academy standpoint, Palafox is another guy who I think you can say he was a solid player. He's actually been in academy for I think 3 years now, if I have that correct. Maybe it's 2, but I think it was 3. But his most recent year was on Cloud9, and I do think I know I didn't watch a ton of Cloud9 Academy games, but I do think that he benefited from being on Cloud9 and having strong performances. I'm not saying that he got carried by the people on Cloud9 Academy, but I do think that being on Cloud9, their academy team, will just elevate you no matter what because of how much talent they have on that academy roster. Now on the flip side, Diamond, who's been on Cloud9 Academy for I think 2 years now, could be even 3 maybe. He has been like I've been saying that this guy should be a starting LCS support. At least up until last year. There was rumors that he was going to get signed by Optic before they rebranded to Immortals last season. I think he's a very solid player. I think he will perform well. I think pairing him with Johnson, I think we're going to see a little bit of a Johnson Afremu thing from Dignitas in terms of their level of play. But for me, when your weakest roles are mid-jungle and the meta revolves around mid-jungle, that is a problem for me. So I do think that if their mid-jungle will underperform, this team could look really terrible. But if they're able to hold their own and sort of Licorice and Johnson are able to step up and be those star players, I think that this can be like a playoff contending team.
Yeah, and to your point about playing for Cloud9 Academy, I think everyone was hoping that the Cloud9 Academy players got to see some time in the LCS this split because they had so much success at the academy level. Like, again, I've talked this whole time about players that were average in academy. Well, these guys were not average. This was
they're
a team
above
that was
average players.
right, and these are guys that at least deserve a shot for sure. I'm not saying that a Blaze Oliver Revenge don't deserve a shot, but I'm saying that Palafox and Diamond for sure deserve a shot, and that's why I think this team is really exciting. The other thing that I want to touch on is Licorice. I definitely still think he's one of the best top laners in the league, so take this with a grain of salt. I think that Licorice from 2 years and 3 years ago is a little bit better than the Licorice that we've seen lately. And I don't know why that is exactly. I think that he's played a little bit more aggressive, so you're seeing some higher risk, high reward. But I think that Licorice has fallen off a little bit. just a little bit. And so I don't know whether to expect the same sort of licorice that we've seen or expect a decline. But regardless, like I said, I still think he's one of the best top laners in the league. And when you look at the whole FlyQuest roster as a whole, I think that FlyQuest did the best out of all of the LCS teams for the situation they were put in. Their whole roster was getting gutted. You knew that since they had such a good Worlds performance and they don't have the cash flow that a Cloud9, TL, or TSM would have, you knew that there was a good chance they weren't going to be able to hold on to their players. For having their whole team stripped and being able to replace it with what I think looks like a very respectable roster, I think FlyQuest did a really good job, and I definitely could see the argument that they won the offseason for those reasons.
Just to quickly touch on Licorice before I move on. I do agree with you that I think his performances previous, like season 8, season 9, were better than his season 10 performance. I do also think, especially with the whole Cloud9 roster and how they sort of failed at the end of the summer season and in playoffs, was their whole read on the meta was completely wrong. We talked on the show previously about how we never understood Cloud9's like draft prioritization with continually first picking Set, not having any Shen priority. They were just getting dogged by Shen, and not even that like Shen was solo carrying the game. It's just they were giving up Shen and they weren't really playing around Shen, doing a lot of skirmishing. And once like post level 6, Shen is such a good champion at preventing skirmishes or turning the tides of skirmishes, where equal number fights turn into +1 advantages, or 2 versus 3s or 2 versus 1s quickly can turn into an equal number fight.
Yeah, no, that's a good point though, that like it was hard to judge the Cloud9 roster just because their meta read was so wrong. You make me laugh about the Set first pick.
Please stop that.
Our regular listeners will know, but JNT, he's got some hate for the first pick Set. He's not too happy about that. But we mentioned that 1,000 times in past episodes. So how about we just move on from that and get you away from your nightmare there?
Yep. I will also mention that I definitely was considering putting FlyQuest in the sort of B tier. It's just I do think, for me, I had to have TSM and EG just a little step above them.
Okay. Speaking of EG, is that who we got next?
Yep.
I considered putting them in the B tier. I was back and forth. I didn't know where to put them.
Well, go ahead.
You want to start with this one, or should I start?
Go ahead. You're giving your reasons. Let me hear them.
Okay, so the biggest I mean, I think there's two significant improvements. I actually think that Ignar is a much bigger upgrade is just a big upgrade over Zeyzal, thank you. Like I thought that Zeyzal had his champions that he looked good on, and I think there was only a few of them. And while I would say that Ignar is kind of similar, he had his champions that he looked good on. I think he looked really good on them, and I think his champ pool was a little bit bigger. Very good playmaking. So even though I think that Zeyzal was good at playmaking, his Alistar was fantastic. I think that you get just a better playmaker in Ignar. So I really like that upgrade. Impact, I'm waiting to see a new version of Impact this year. I've mentioned it time and time again that he is a tank player, and that's what we've seen out of him. We are not living in the dinosaur age anymore. It's time to move on. You have to be able to play carries, and I think Impact is going to look for that this year. I think that this is the year we're going to see Impact not stray away from tanks, but lean a little bit more towards carries, and I hope that we see a new version of Impact. I still think he's better than Huni, so I think that that's an upgrade. And honestly, when you look at that, I think that this is a good roster. I do like that Definitely's getting another shot in the LCS. I don't think that his past shot, I think he just played for Golden Guardians, right? Was that it?
Yeah, he was stuck on the like dog Golden Guardians roster when they first franchised, and then he had a little bit of time on Cloud9 Academy and did see a little bit of LCS play. But yeah, I agree. I think he's one of the few Academy players that deserves a second shot due to, one, the original circumstance he was put in, and two, the improvements that he's made in the Academy system. Like he hasn't just stagnated in Academy. He's improved. He's gotten on better teams. He's learned more, and like for those reasons, he should get another shot.
Yeah, and so with that, I just think that you have a good roster here. I don't think it's amazing. There's a reason I only have them in the A tier, and I was considering B. I think they fall in that A to B section. They're nowhere near S, but I think this is a team that you should be able to watch and expect to see some good things over the course of the full year.
Yeah, I think EG just did a really good job of fixing their problems. In the top lane, they were kind of flip-flopping between Kumo and Huni. They had to, that, oh, okay, we have to sub out Jizuke because we want Huni to come in, and now we brought Golden Glue. But what they added in the top lane was stability. Impact is he's a rock in the top lane. There's always been question marks about Impact, whether he can play up to the talent that he's up against, or oh, he's only a tank player. He only can do this, only can that. We'll have to see. But he's always solid. Impact is never the problem. And I think that's
Well, and
one.
one thing that I'll say is that his playstyle has had lots of success in the LCS.
Mhm.
Not so much on the world stage, but in the LCS. I
Yeah.
mean, you see Impact make it to playoffs and make it far in playoffs. Mind you, he's always on a team, but still, like, it's something that is usually good enough for the
Yeah.
LCS level.
And that's one of the reasons why I think, this split we might see a different Impact, because I'm starting to just question, was Impact's success and play style a product of the teams that he was on? Because for the most part, when he was on Cloud9, he had like a Sven Skaren, what's his face? He had Contracts and Jensen.
Contracts?
Yeah, first off, and they were kind of like Contracts and Jensen in season 7 were the dynamic duo for that split. And then when he went over to Team Liquid, he obviously had that super stacked Team Liquid roster with Doublelift, like that first Doublelift roster with Xmithy, Doublelift, and they had Pobelter, Ole. And then when they moved into the Jensen Core JJ phase, like that team was fucking stacked. And it's a lot easier to sort of sit back and do your job and do it well when your teammates are just simply outclassing the other players. Like we do still see it, but we don't see it too much anymore where like the top die Impact where he's really dominating his opposing laner. He just does a solid and serviceable job playing the engage, playing the tank, and it does result in a lot of success for the team. But I do wonder, with EG's talent just being a lot lower than the former TL talent, if he's sort of going to be able to play that same safe play style with little to no repercussions.
Yeah. For me, if I'm going to be, because I wanna stay consistent and kind of play devil's advocate like I did with Licorice, I think that we saw a really small drop off with Svenskeren and Jizuke. Also, I don't think we saw these guys playing at their top level, and I think that that is very much what I just said about Licorice. So I think that if this team wants to succeed and be a top team, we need to see Svenskeren and Jizuke play to what we've seen them play before. And when it comes to Jizuke, I'm talking about a little bit more consistency. There's no question, everyone has said this, that he's going to impact the game. It's about whether he's going to have a good or a bad impact. That's something we've heard time and time again, but it's true. Like, this guy is fun to watch, I'll say that for sure. He's kind of got that insanity thing going where he's hella aggro and he plays to win the lane, but sometimes he'll run it down. But yeah, I think that we could still see good things from this team, and so that's ultimately why I did put them in A, leaning more towards a solid and consistent performance from this roster than one that's inconsistent and a little bit weaker.
Yeah, I think for me, just to flip to their bot lane really quickly, their bot lane was a huge problem last split, specifically in the summer. Like, to be blunt here, like Bang was legitimately on like suicide watch. Like that dude was not having a good time. There were multiple, tweets and kind of expressions that he was like,
let's not say suicide watch. Let's be clear that let's be clear. I know what you're saying,
dude.
But I just want people to know. I don't want to start any rumors that he was. Don't take that in the literal sense, guys. But what JNT is saying, and I know that we saw it, was you could tell he didn't really want to be there.
Dude,
let's just say that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm kind of half joking with that comment, but like, there were a bunch of tweets that came out about Bang saying how like he didn't like being North America, how he just wanted to be back in Korea. He clearly, based on his like facial expressions and body language during games, like he wasn't enjoying it. If he was ever losing, he would just instantly get pretty tilted and just kind of AFK the game. And I didn't think that didn't really help Zeyzal in the fact that whenever they got behind, it was pretty much over from that point. There was almost no comeback potential with this team, specifically in the bot lane, because it kind of just seemed like once they got behind, they just boomed. And I do think that, you mentioned Ignar already, that he was, in my opinion, a top 3 support, maybe top 2, you could argue, in the LCS last year. And I do think that'll give, another form of, engage and stability as opposed to their previous bot lane of Bang and Zeyzal.
Yeah, so I want to talk about I'm going to go into the hunger argument, and for people that are wondering what the hell I'm talking about, is a lot of times you'll hear people talk about whether a player is hungry to win, like they really want it. And to me, I think what people do, which is a mistake, I think they see, oh, this guy is really hungry for wins and so he'll perform well. I don't think that's how it works for me. I think it's this player is really hungry for wins, so he be a liability. I don't think, because there's lots of players in the league that are all hungry to win. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I don't think you can look at a guy that's, oh, he's super motivated. That means he'll absolutely pop off. No, to me, super motivated just means that you're not going to run it down. And I think that that's the extent that the hunger argument can really go to. And I think that with Deftly, you've got a guy that is hungry to win. And I don't think you had that with Bang. So to me, that is actually an upgrade, even though historically, obviously, Bang has got a lot more accomplishments and skill under his belt. I think that you will get more out of Deftly because he wants to be there. I think that's fairly safe to say.
Yep. Definitely agree. Do you want to move on to TSM now?
Sure.
Yeah, so moving on, we got TSM. I have them in the B tier. Blue Jay has them in the A tier. I kind of see, they're sort of similar to Dignitas in that a lot of what they had going for them, I mean, not even that, just that, like, they just have massive downgrades in their roster, to be honest. Like, I think a lot of people were initially confused and surprised by the initial rumors of Huni potentially joining TSM and them getting rid of Broken Blade, because I think everyone can agree Broken Blade is a better player than Huhi. We see that constantly with Huni. We saw that constantly with his play over the last 2 years, and even Broken Blade bodying Huni in like the 1v1. Like we saw that in Broken Blade's first LCS game. They were playing like Aatrox versus Victor top lane, and Broken Blade like solo killed him 2 times. Or maybe it was Sion and Aatrox. Maybe it was one of the 2 matchups, but Broken Blade solo killed him twice. But TSM kind of made what I would say is like the surprise move of the offseason, bringing in Huni for their top lane. They obviously still have Spica, but another 2 big losses is Bjergsen and Doubleth retiring.
Yeah. So here's what I want to say though, because you mentioned how there's some significant downgrades on this roster. I would agree, but I would also say that there's some significant upgrades. So I think your downgrades are your top and mid. I think that, like you said, Broken Blade being subbed out for Huni, or not subbed out, but traded, or him signing with another team rather, and being with Huni, I think that is a downgrade. Obviously, you're replacing the GOAT of North America, Bjergsen, with Power of Evil. That one though, I don't think that is a very significant downgrade. I think it is a downgrade. Don't get me wrong. But I think what we saw out of Power of Evil, not just last year, but since he's joined the LCS, this guy has been a top tier LCS player. Even when he's playing on bad rosters, when he was playing for Optic, he was one of the very bright lights in the, I don't know how to do this metaphor, but basically he was hard carrying his team. And then even with CLG, let me remind people that just a year ago, or I guess now a year and a half ago, when he was on CLG, this was a 3rd or 4th place team.
Fourth place team.
They were in Detroit playing for the 3rd, 4th place match and almost qualifying for Worlds, if I remember right, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got rid of him, and CLG became one of the worst teams. So I just need to let people know the kind of impact that this guy has had on his teams. And then we saw him last year with FlyQuest. He was great. Definitely one of their best players, if not their best player, if he's not one player. So I think that if you have to replace Bjergsen, which they did, you've got a really good guy to slot into that position. And now, I think with Bjergsen at the helm as one of the coaches, or as the head coach rather, I think Bjergsen is going to be a fantastic head coach. I know there's a lot of people that they don't really know what to think about Bjergsen going into the head coaching role. I think he's a perfect fit. And from what we hear, he's already been kind of player/coach in the first place. To me, I think it's going to be a very easy transition. And I think Bjergsen being able to focus full time on what his players are doing and not having to focus on his own gameplay will help this team a lot. And that's why for me, I've got TSM in the A rather than the B.
Yeah, for me, and we already discussed this a little bit when, I think in our last episode, when we did kind of hear the retirement news from Bjergsen. But one of the things that I do think about TSM is it's going to take a lot of time for this roster. Because as you mentioned, the whole entirety of the identity of TSM has revolved around Bjergsen and partially Doublelift since their inception, pretty much, minus, season... I would say since the inception of the LCS, Bjergsen coming into the LCS in Season 4 and pretty much dominating it from there on out. the whole entire team and play style revolved around either Bjergsen or Doublelift for the greater part of 6 years. And I think with Bjergsen transitioning to a head coach role and Doublelift retiring from professional play and them having to bring in new players and, in turn, new leaders is going to take time. I think this TSM roster does have a lot of potential with, their individual players. I think Spica, he is kind of like, we'll really have to see. He had a solid year, but I think he can be like one of the next best junglers in the LCS.
Me too.
They're bringing in world finalist Sword Art. The Huni, he's a bit coin flippy. Let's put it out there. But like you mentioned, they have a very solid mid laner in Power of Evil, and Lost is sort of getting his second chance in the LCS. So while I do think that this TSM roster has a lot of potential, for me, I think it's going to take a lot of time for Bjergsen to sort of integrate his system or revamp and create a new system for TSM to work under.
Yeah, this roster I could go on about all day. There's it's so interesting to me. This is one of the most interesting rosters. I do agree with you as far as your point about Spica. I started saying this towards the end of summer last year that like this guy just keeps getting better and better and better. And with one, I think this is going to be the year of Spica. I think this is the year that he's actually going to pop off and prove he is one of the best players in the LCS. And I'm really excited to see what he can do. I love this guy. I love the impact that he has on the game. And we saw he was their best player for many of their games in summer and in at Worlds. Even though, I mean, let's be honest, there wasn't too many good Worlds performances out of the other players. But regardless, if you're the best player on your team at Worlds, I think that means something, and I think that that's what we saw out of Spica.
Yep. I don't know. I don't have too much more to say about TSM.
The other the other things that I want to say. I got a little bit more. I'll try not to go too long because, like I said, I could go on all day. But I want to talk about Lost going in instead of Doublelift, because I think a lot of people will look at this and see that like Doublelift, who was the best AD carry that North America has had, like he's the GOAT of AD carries for North America. I still could actually see this change being an upgrade just because of the drop off we saw from Doublelift this past year. I am not saying that Doublelift is a worse AD carry than Lost, but I am saying that maybe as of right now, I feel like you're not going to have the motivation issues that you had with Doublelift last year, and that's a little bit more comfort for TSM fans. And there's been a lot of hype around Lost saying that this is a guy that deserves an LCS shot, and he was very close to being traded to EG. That was a whole mess. That I don't even know if we got time to get into that, but I think that TSM might actually benefit from keeping him over Doublelift.
One thing I will say with the Doublelift versus Lost is performance-wise, I think the most likely scenario, like if we look at Doublelift's summer split TSM performance, I think in most case scenarios, it'll be a side grade, at best a slight upgrade. But I think you do lose a ton of intangibles when comparing Lost to Doublelift. Looking back at the TSM games, a lot of their wins, and even key wins for that matter, were games where they ended up behind and, they kind of preyed on the missteps of the other team to sort of get back into the game. I think of both CLG games they played against TSM, where CLG had the game won pretty much and threw it twice over to TSM. And, while yes, a good portion of that is CLG playing poorly, the other part of it is Bjergsen and Doublelift just being LCS veterans and knowing what to do in these situations and knowing how to sort of keep things calm and claw their way back into the game. And I think they do lose a lot of that not having Bjergsen and Doublelift anymore. It's going to be a real, I think, one person is going to have to step up and be the voice of this team, whether that's Spica, who's, last year was a rookie pretty much, or whether it's a more veteran player like a Power of Evil. I think that'll matter a lot.
I think that that's accurate when comparing specifically Doublelift to Lost, but if you're talking about a veteran presence, you still have that on this roster. Huni, PoE, and Sword Art have all been around a long time. And also Bjergsen, even if you want to talk about leadership in the coaching role. Like, I don't think you lose the veteran presence just because Doublelift isn't there anymore. So that's what I would say to that. And the last thing about this roster that I want to talk about, I want to talk a little bit more about Sword Art. Because even though I think he's obviously an upgrade over Bio, I think Bio had a pretty weak 2020, and Sword Art obviously going to World Finals. This is where I'm going to play pessimist again, like I did with EG and FlyQuest. But I actually thought that Sword Art was hands down the worst player on that roster. Now, does that mean he was bad? No. Like, guys, you got an upgrade. TSM got a definite upgrade at the support role, but I think a lot of people are expecting Sword Art to come into this roster and be as impactful as some of his other teammates were on Suning, your SOFM, like Angel, like Juan Feng, or Bin. I don't think that he was
Been.
at that level. So I don't think that, even though I like the move and I like the signing, I don't think that Sword Art is as good as people are thinking. I think he's a little bit overrated, but definitely an upgrade and a good move bringing this guy into your roster. That's what I would have to say.
Yeah, to me, I do agree that I think Sword Art was, by the end of it, the worst performing player on Suning. And you kind of got to compare this to the Core JJ move that Team Liquid made, and comparing it to that move, like Core JJ was still like in his prime and still was the best player on his team at the time, Gen G.
Yeah.
And just comparing it to that, I do think that Sword Art is worse than Core JJ. And in terms of like Sword Art fitting into the TSM team, I don't necessarily see it as simple as it was with Team Liquid.
Oh, and one last thing I wanted to say, because I think most people have put these rumors to bed, but just to make sure that it is no longer. For those wondering, yes, Sword Art does have good English. I have seen him speak English, and so a lot of people were worried about a player from China coming over to North America. This is a guy that can speak English and pretty well, I might add. So I don't think there's going to be huge communication issues. Just wanted to throw that in there because that's something people were afraid of. And so don't worry, TSM fans, his English is good. Like, it is definitely manageable. So yeah.
Beast.
All right. Next.
100T, you go first.
100T. Okay, so I mean, Golden Guardians also
2.0.
like yeah. If in case you don't know, basically this 100 Thieves lineup is going to be Golden Guardians' old lineup. However, you keep Someday in the top lane instead of having why are names? Why am I struggling with names? Hanser instead of Hanser. Um, and for me, the thing that stands out is, and I said this to you earlier, this is Someday's chance. I think this is like maybe not his chance, but this will be the most important LCS year of his career. Because I think since he has joined the LCS, he hasn't seen a lot of success. He has individually, but not with the full roster. I think there was his first split with 100 Thieves. They ended up going to the finals. So there was some success there, but I think after that they kind of went boom, the 100 Thieves roster, and they haven't really seen any success since. Someday has been great, but he hasn't been able to carry his team. Now we see a roster that a lot of people have a lot of hype around because, let's be honest, the four players, Closer, Demonte, FBI, and Huhi, that fill out the rest of the roster, had a very, very good end to their 2020 season. So now that you have a slight upgrade in the top lane, I don't think Hanser was bad by any means, but I just think Someday was better. I think this is the year for Someday to actually have, hopefully, some continued success in this league. And I think that 100 Thieves should definitely be on the upper half of the bracket by the end of the year. They'd be at least a top 5 team. A lot of people are giving them top 3 or top 4.
Yeah, I'd probably put them around top 4. Although I do initially have them in the A bracket as opposed to TSM in the B bracket. Like that's the kind of like race I have going. Like, is 100 Thieves going to be better than TSM? And for me, having their like stability in their roster and basically it just being like the 4 best members from Golden Guardians plus Someday kind of just does it for me. And plus, I think they're also joining a great organization in terms of coaching and managing with Zix and Papa Smithy. I think that they're going to do just as good of a job, if not better, than Enero was doing with Golden Guardians. They're going to just, because they're a richer org, they're just going to have more access to like, coaching, like where it's like positional coaching or just like working with their players. I think they're just going to have more resources available. I think that will benefit all the players.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that there's a lot of respect to be given to the management of 100 Thieves, and I don't. There's not much to say about this roster for me because I think we know what we're getting. You feel that way? Like,
Yeah,
it feels
like
like 2020 Golden Guardians is just being slotted. I mean, it really is. 4 of their 5 players are there, and so I don't think we should see much different. I'm going to play devil advocate with this roster as well, or pessimist again, just to be consistent. Um, I do want to remind people that they didn't have that great of a start to summer. While they looked great in playoffs, this was a 9-9 roster by the end of summer. So even looked a lot better than a 9-9 team. I can't discount that their record wasn't as good as maybe the hype that surrounds this roster. And so, if we're going to be fair, we need to remind everyone that this team wasn't absolutely destroying everyone all of summer split. And they looked good in playoffs, but it ended pretty abruptly, and they didn't have a long period of time where they were playing at that level. And so, if someone came in with a pessimist attitude of 100 Thieves, I could see that argument where you do not think they're a top 3 team, or maybe even a top 4 team. Although me personally, I do think that. But yeah,
Yeah, the one thing that I think with this 100 Thieves roster is like the Golden Guardians roster at the end of the season was at its peak. And when they were at their peak, even, they weren't able to take down what you could say was a slumping TSM. So
that's a good point.
moving into this season, just because of their roster stability, I think they will perform very well, and they will be a team that can come flying out of the gate and might start off with a huge record. But I think with teams that we might see like TSM or FlyQuest, teams that are doing a kind of complete rebuild in terms of their play style, their coaching staff, or their players, once they sort of figure it and get it together, I think 100 Thieves will probably face some real challenges because just taking a look at their roster, like they don't have much like room to go like even further.
Yeah.
Like they added Someday, and like if Someday's playing at his best, like that's how much further I think this roster can go. But other than that, like I don't know, like their roster was playing at its peak and they still couldn't get past like the slumping TSM. They struggled in the big moments, and obviously that could be, sort of pointed to them being like a bunch of playoff rookies. Not all of them are rookies, but players like Closer and FBI specifically, they're star players, maybe not kind of showing up in the big moments. But I hopefully that won't be an issue moving into their next couple seasons, which are gonna they're more veterans at this point.
Well, and something else that we have to point out is that I don't think they weren't a team that people had a lot of high expectations for last year. And I think that's something else that is different this year. This is now a roster that a lot of people have expectations for, and a lot of people think that this team's going to Worlds. So, and you can't ignore that when you're playing in playoffs or just even the regular season, when there is expectation put on you, the mental game comes into play here. And that's something that is very different for this roster. Who knows how they'll be able to handle that kind of pressure? But one thing I can tell you for sure is that the pressure will change for this year. They will have more pressure on their shoulders, and so I want to see how that affects them as well.
For sure. We good to move on to the Team
Yeah,
Liquid?
let's go TL. What's up? You start.
Um, yeah, I think it's everyone's kind of everyone's sort of under the opinion that TL and C9 are kind of above and beyond the rest of the LCS teams in terms of individual skill, team skill, and like in confidence in terms of their performances coming up into 2021. I don't think anybody. I'd be very surprised to hear if anybody had a team other than Cloud9 or Team Liquid in the top two. And I think part of that is just due to how insanely stacked their rosters are. With Team Liquid, they constantly are able to find upgrades with their roster. As good as we think their roster is, they are willing to make these big money moves to bring in upgrades. They brought Alfari over from EU, who was the number one all-pro top laner for Europe last summer split, to bring in and replace Impact. And they also pretty much stole Santorin from FlyQuest to bring him in over Broxa.
Stole. They stole him.
Yeah, they stole him.
Okay, so while I definitely I agree, everyone or pretty much everyone will have TL or Cloud9 at the top of their tier lists or their power rankings or whatever you want to call it. I do think that some of the potential flaws have been ignored, and since we're talking about TL, I'll start with them first, of course. There was a lot of hype with Broxa going into Team Liquid, and for good reason. He was one of the better better junglers from Europe going into what we thought was a very stacked roster. Now, I don't think that Santorin is the same style of aggressive, but they were both aggressive junglers going into a Team Liquid roster. I would say that Broxa was more aggressive as to invading the jungle, and Santorin is more aggressive as to ganking lanes. That's where I think the differences of aggression is, but aggressive nonetheless. And so you have to wonder, Team Liquid struggled with an aggressive jungler last year. Will they struggle with an aggressive jungler this year? I don't think that will be the case, but it's something I can't ignore, and I haven't heard many people talk about that. And I think if we're going, you need to be fair. And even though we're all very excited for the Cloud9 and TL roster, you need to not ignore some of the potential flaws that that these rosters could have. And there is the process of Alfari, who was a great top laner in Europe, transitioning over to America. Any one of the European players that are coming over, you could wonder, like Xerxes, for example, you could wonder if they're going to struggle or have success in that transition, because we've seen, or Perks for that matter, we've seen a lot of players come from Europe and just fail, and we've seen a lot of them have lots of success. And so I don't think that it's automatic Santorin's going to slot in and be the best top laner in North America either. And so that's where my pessimistic take comes in for Team Liquid. Other than that, though, let's get to reality here. You mentioned earlier that top down they have one of the best players in every single role, and I think that's absolutely true. And that's why, for me, they're in the S tier.
Yeah.
I could see a world, I'm not saying we will see a world, but we could see a world where the all pro team at the end of the year is top through bot all TL players. Do I think Jensen's going to finish ahead of Perks? No, but if it did happen, I wouldn't be the most surprised person ever. So there's that. And I think that you just got to line up odds.
Yeah, I think my one, I don't know, maybe it's not my one issue, but one issue that I think this Team Liquid roster could face is just they have too many mouths to feed. Like Alfari is a carry, he's primarily a carry top lane player who likes resource attention. Same with Jensen. He's a carry player who likes to play with resources and likes to play around jungle pressure. And then Tactical and Core JJ, like they're both beasts in the bot lane. I think we can agree that like Core JJ is like the first player in the LCS to really carry the game through support. Like you are winning the game
basis.
Yeah, on a regular basis for like pretty much a whole season. This guy was putting the team on his back with his Blitzcrank, his Thresh, his Bard. Like you could argue he had the best Bard and Blitzcrank in the world probably this past season. And I think this team could suffer from having too many mouths to feed. Like you gotta figure out like their resource management and resource allocation and how they're gonna play around their team. Like, will that mean that like Alfari, Jensen, or Core JJ, one of them might have to shift their play style to be, you know, a little more passive and a little less resource dependent? Like, we'll really have to see how this team plays. Or are we just gonna see maybe them take the Cloud9 approach and just be hyper aggressive and just try to snowball the game early? You know, simply just outclassing the enemy team on an individual level and just accruing gold leads through that.
So for me, I'm not the biggest fan of the too many mouths to feed argument, because I look at it a little bit differently. For me, it looks at you have more mouths that are optional to feed. That's the way I look at it. Like last year, I don't think you were able to play through top lane because usually Impact, if he was on a carry top lane, it was Mordekaiser, which was sometimes very, very good, but sometimes not so good. Now I think you can play through every single lane. So that to me, I think is actually a benefit. If I'm being completely honest, I think that you could play through all of the lanes. And I if you look at other teams, like I don't want to say Team Liquid is, I don't know, is Suning, for example, but Suning is a team that they could carry bot, mid, or top, or jungle even. Like that was an asset. It wasn't too many mouths to feed. It was, look, no matter how the game goes, we can adapt and play around every role. So to me, that's a big plus for TL and not a negative.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a valid point. In terms of, I've talked about Alfari a lot, but to go back to Santorin, personally, I think he's a massive upgrade over Broxa in terms of, you know, his play at the current time, and also the sort of skill set that he brings. I think Santorin, you know, recently he's kind of just been like the best of both worlds with Broxa. He can be put on these aggressive junglers and make plays happen in the early game and influencing lanes, but he can also play like the much more supportive and passive and tank junglers to facilitate the team. So we sort of saw last year with Broxa, once he sort of got into the groove of things, we saw Broxa on a very passive play style and just sort of supporting his laners. But with Santorin on FlyQuest, we saw towards the back half of their season, there were games where Santorum was putting the team on his back and he was picking Lilia. Like, he was pretty much the main person who was dominating on Lilia when the champion finally got released into pro play. And, we saw that in the playoff series they had against Cloud9 where, they're doing early invades onto the Raptor camp. They're pushing the pace of the game. They're making plays all around the map. And I think Santorum it's going to be a good fix for, some of the problems that they had last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an upgrade in the jungle, and I think this team is just better than what we saw last year.
Yeah, not much more to say for me.
Yep. All right, so let's move on. Cloud9 is the last one on the list.
Yeah, C9 last up. What you could argue probably is, though, I don't know what the argument really is, but they've made the biggest free agent acquisition in LCS history with bringing who you could say is a top 2 Western player of all time in Perks, paying what is now the all-time highest buyout for a player contract to bring him to North America from Europe. I know when this rumor sort of first came out, everyone was just so excited to see, one, Perks swapping back to mid lane, and two, him actually coming to North America.
Yeah, because you've got a new world-class mid laner coming to North America. And just to your opening statement there about Cloud9, I would want to challenge it a little bit with the acquisition of Bjergsen way back in the day.
Well, I guess
But
what I would say is that,
salary and
yeah, at the time, it wasn't necessarily historical. Bjergsen wasn't this all
right,
great player.
yes.
He obviously turned into the best North American player of all time.
Right.
But Perks is viewed right now as a top
Yes.
2 Western player of all time.
Absolutely. And that's where the difference lies between those acquisitions, just so people aren't sitting here going Bjergsen question mark question mark question mark, of course, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. And for me, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start off with my pessimistic view and then come back to, well, what I think would be reality. But again, Cloud9 is another roster where I think people have ignored the worrisome signs or the uh-oh signs or whatever. And for me, that's top and jungle. We'll start with Fudge. Fudge has looked great in Academy, and I don't think Cloud9 would want to replace Licorice, one of the best top laners that we've seen in the LCS, if they weren't confident that Fudge was going to be able to replace him and have success. But without showing success so far at the LCS level, to me, I don't think that's an automatic, you've got an absolute stud in the top lane. So I want to wait and see a little bit more with Fudge, but I don't think it's as set in stone that he's going to be the best top laner or one of in the league until we see it. So that's the little bit pessimistic there. And then with Blabber, I need to remind people that Blabber was pretty much running it down the second half of summer. And while I do think that Blabber is still one of the best junglers in the league, I do think that I can't just forget that he was running it down for 9 games approximately. And then even in playoffs, it looked even worse. I hear no one talking about that. And while I look at the roster and I'm like, this is a great roster, I really do think that we can't just assume that they're going to come in and be the absolute best when there are some reasonable things to be cautious about. And I think, like I said, I think that's top and jungle that aren't absolutely set in stone. But we've seen time and time again Cloud9 promote players and make very good players out of them. They're probably the best team in the league at developing players. They always have a really good history of finding new players and whatnot, of scouting them. And so I do have confidence that everything will be fine in the end. The only thing that is really, really different, I mean, of course, some of the players have changed, but this is the first year without Reaper, which is going to look different, right? Cloud9 has had a lot of success for what, 4 years, 5 years? Reaper was there for quite some time.
He
and
came
this is the first
in
time.
summer season 6.
Okay,
So 4.5 years.
It's been quite some time since we've seen a different guy that's not Reaper coaching this team, and so Rainover is going to slot into that spot. Rainover was working with the academy team, if I'm not mistaken, or he was assistant coach. I don't remember, but the point is, Reaper is not brand new to this roster. He does have some experience in coaching these players, and so I think that he'll be fine slotting in. And then look, you've just got a great roster, right? Fudge top, Blabber jungle, Perks mid, Sven 80 carry, and Vulcan support. This is an absolute stud roster, just like Team Liquid is, or at least we believe it will be so. And so, yeah, I don't see how this team doesn't finish top 2. yeah, I don't know. I expect good things from this roster.
Yeah, I'll kind of just quickly go through mid, bot, and support because I think everybody is of the opinion that Perks is coming into the LCS as the best mid laner and will be the best mid laner. Maybe not necessarily, that won't correlate with team success because there definitely is the argument that people are making that Team Liquid is better than Cloud9 and will finish above Cloud9. But I don't think anyone thinks that Perks is a worse mid laner than Jensen or is worse than any mid laner in the whole league.
Yeah.
And Sven and Vulcan, even though C9 was slumping very hard, and in the few games that C9 was actually playing very well and did win a playoff series and a few playoff games, was off the back of Sven and Vulcan. I think they were a top bot lane in the league. For me, I didn't necessarily have like a clear cut best bot lane last split. I kind of had like a 3-way tie for first, and Sven, Vulcan, Tactical Core JJ, and FBI Huhi. And I'm still going into this next season with that same opinion that those are the best 3 bot lanes in the league by far. And we'll have to see if Sven and Vulcan can continue their success going into the next season, and I think they will do so. But like you said, the biggest question marks are top and jungle. With Blabber, we will have to see if he can play, a little more controlled, like in terms of like controlled aggression and knowing when to fight as opposed to just fighting 24/7. But to go to Fudge, I do have a lot of confidence that he will, at the very least, be a solid top laner. Obviously, there are a lot of very good top laners in the league now with Alfari, Someday, Impact. Like those are kind of like the top 3 that you have to kind of beat and prove that you are better than them to sort of gain the respect of everybody else. But in terms of like the more lower tier top laners like Niles, Revenged, Finn, and Fake God, like I would put Fudge above the majority of those players. And we'll really have to see sort of if he can play that licorice role that we saw back in Season 8, where he comes into this team and does a really good job. And I think they will be able to do that. I think, as you've now mentioned, the additions they've made to the coaching staff with changing over from Reaper to Reignover, and while that is very big, they've also brought in a bunch of new players or new coaches onto their coaching staff. They brought in Mithy, who was the former head coach of Fnatic, who played with Sven and Vulcan for 2 years on G2. They brought in Max Waldo, another. Who did I say? Sven. Yeah. Well, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, he played with Perks and Sven. Was who I meant to say.
Yeah.
They brought in Max Waldo, another LS disciple, just like Fudge, and Vigar V2, who my boy Mahmood was hyping up a lot about. I don't know personally a lot about him. I seen his stuff on Twitter. I don't know. I don't really know who he is, but from the responses so far, it seems like he's a pretty knowledgeable person.
I want to go back to the Fudge discussion just really quick because I want to get your thought on this. If Cloud9 didn't have such success with Licorice, do you think Cloud9 fans would feel as okay as they do right now with Fudge? Like, don't you think it's because Licorice came in the league as a big question mark and turned out, more than fine that like people are kind of okay with the Fudge transition?
Yeah, but
like that sense, right?
I do, but it's not even that it was just Licorice. Since contracts, you can pretty much like label
Right.
like every single young and new player who's been brought into Cloud9 has turned into a top player when playing on Cloud9.
Yeah. Smoothie
Started out with
Zazel.
contracts and Smoothie. I guess Smoothie was even before that. Jensen, Licorice, Blabber, Golden Glue when he played,
The
Zazel.
list is long.
Like it's a long list. There's a ton of
Yeah.
players that Cloud9 have personally like brought up and fostered into the LCS who are now on different teams and having success on different teams. And it kind of just their reputation precedes them in terms of being able to
Right.
develop talent and knowing when, okay, this player is good enough, we can make a big move and put him in.
My last thought that I have for this Cloud9 roster is I think people need to not forget one of the reasons their playstyle worked so well was the shove and roam style that Niski adopted, and whether or not losing him will actually hurt, even though they are replacing him with Perks. And I have a lot of confidence that Perks would be able to fit any playstyle they need. I do want to point out that one of the reasons Cloud9 had such success was because of Niski. I think Niski was so incredibly underrated.
Mhm.
Like, I think people have just forgotten how good he was for that roster because he's being replaced by Perks, right? And so that's another thing that I think we can't forget is Niski was second in line for MVP voting in spring, and if he had won MVP in spring, I don't think there would have been a huge uproar. I think a lot of people, myself included, I had Niski as the spring MVP with Blabber second behind him because that duo was so good, and now that duo doesn't exist anymore. And so that there's going to be some synergy that needs to be built between Blabber and Perks, and I think that's another thing that people can't forget about.
For sure. I can't really disagree with that.
Okay, is that wrapping up the tier list?
I think so.
Okay, what we got next?
I'm just closing down the images.
We did go for quite a while, doing that tier list.
Yeah. Next
bad.
up, we were gonna. I know it's been quite a long episode already, but let's get into just a little bit of the lock-in tournament and which teams we think will perform well, which teams could struggle, and they actually did a draft for the group stage of the LCS Lock-in tournament. So the way that the format for it is working is there's 2 groups of 5 teams, which you can see now. Group A is TSM, Team Liquid, 100 Thieves, CLG, and Golden Guardians. And Group B is FlyQuest, Cloud9, EG, Dignitas, and Immortals. And the way I believe it works is the teams will play each other in their group one time. So you'll play a total of 4 games. And then it sort of moves on to a playoff bracket followed by seeding. I believe that's how it works.
Did you mention? You may have mentioned it. Did you mention that who was drafting? Did you mention that?
Oh,
TSM
yeah.
and FlyQuest were the ones.
You can say it there. No,
Yeah,
I didn't,
okay,
but go ahead.
So because TSM and FlyQuest were the ones that were in finals last year, they are the top 2 teams technically, and so they were the ones drafting teams into their group. And so it would look like TSM got first pick. And if you just go left to right and work your way up, that seems to me how the draft would have gone. So that being TSM would have picked Golden Guardians first, and then FlyQuest would have picked Immortals second. Then TSM goes CLG. Then FlyQuest picks Dignitas. Then other side 100 Thieves. Then back over to the other side for EG. Then TL. Then Cloud9. And that to me, like, that makes sense, right? And that
Yeah.
seems like how they would have picked the teams that they want to go up against.
Yeah, just looking at these groups for me, I definitely favor Cloud9 to finish first in that group, and I probably favor Team Liquid to finish first in that Group A. Just looking at the groups on first glance.
For me, when I look at this, there's nothing crazy that I have to say that I haven't made the point of already when just going through the teams. People know who we think is strongest, and that's very obvious. We said TL and C9. We expect to be top 2. I don't think there's any reason for us to not put them at the top of their group, and so that's who we expect to win their groups. But who do you expect to win the whole tournament?
For me, for anybody who has heard my takes on Hotline League the last couple weeks, was one of the ones that I did mention was that I thought Team Liquid was actually favored coming into this lock-in tournament. But just yesterday, I was watching a video that got posted on the Cloud9 YouTube channel where I Will Dominate was doing an interview with the entirety of the Cloud9 roster. Cloud9 was mentioning that a lot of the teams, specifically Team Liquid, they're experiencing visa issues again. So they're having difficulty bringing their international players to the United States. They didn't give any specifics. All that they said was that Team Liquid was experiencing visa problems and that they were playing with academy players, in addition to a couple other LCS teams also having to sub in academy players for scrims. So for me, that kind of does actually push C9 over the edge because they're going to be more practiced. And I do think that will be very important just coming into this tournament. It's going to be the first games of the year. And I feel like a lot of the teams who had the most time to sort of gel and kind of figure everything out will have an advantage going to this tournament. So I do have C9 as first with this new information.
Well, and if we're going with the who's gonna be the quickest to gel and whatnot, that I could totally see C9 being like your pick to win it all. But if there is those kinds of visa issues, then my choice might be 100 Thieves, seeing as this is a roster that should already have a lot of synergy put together. And while I don't think 100 Thieves is the best team in the league, like you said, this is get up and go. There's no time to gel, and there's no time so maybe 100 Thieves is actually the favorite for this tournament. Me personally, I'm going to go with there's no visa issues, even though I realize there's a good chance that there is. If there were no visa issues, my choice to win the tournament is still Team Liquid. I just think they're the best roster. And so For me, that's what I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go TL. If there is visa issues, then I'm gonna go 100 Thieves. But
Yeah,
see, I don't like making the predictions of, because if there is visa issues, we don't know for who. Like, we don't know who's got the visa issues. So,
yeah.
eh, I'm just gonna go, if there's none, I'm gonna go with Team Liquid to win.
Yeah, it is really hard to tell, and it is kind of unfortunate that these problems are arising again, specifically for Team Liquid, because that kind of derailed their whole spring season last year.
Yeah.
So hopefully, these issues can get resolved, and hopefully this doesn't have too big of an effect on the lock-in tournament itself, and even worst comes to worst, the start of the season.
Yeah, the worst case scenario is that it affects the start of the season, because now spring matters, right? That's the nightmare, if you will, or worst case scenario. But anyways, it is what it is. I don't think there's really much LCS teams can do about that. I've said this to you before. If this was an NHL, MLB, NFL, whatever NBA player, I don't think there would be any issues. But unfortunately, LCS is not totally seen in the mainstream media like those sports are, and so I don't think it's to that level yet where everyone knows who Broxa is, for example, or insert name here, right?
Hmm.
So until we're at that stage, I think that we're going to see visa issues year over year, because I think it's out of their control, honestly.
Hmm.
All right, let's
Moving
move on
on.
to,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the lock-in tournament does in fact start January 15th on the Friday, and the schedule has been released for the game. So we're going to do a quick rundown of just our game picks this year, or I guess for this split. I guess we are going to sort of do a full tally and kind of total it week to week, and we're still kind of deciding, but we do want to sort of place some sort of bet or like maybe forfeit for the loser. We still haven't really decided. If you want, feel free to like drop a comment or anything, or like message us on Twitter or anything like that with potential suggestions. We really don't know, but we do want to do something to sort of keep track and figure out who wins by the end of it.
Who do you think won last year?
I have no clue, to be honest.
I
Yeah,
don't know,
okay.
honestly.
The thing that I found though was I feel like I took more upsets sometimes.
Oh,
So I'm
this
not
is where
sure
we
though.
play the I took
No,
the hard.
no, I'm
I'm
not
just
saying
breaking
that.
your
I'm just saying that like
I'm just breaking
that
your balls.
I might have lost just because I do remember me take like you would like we would try to take an upset a week, but like
Yeah,
I
we
was
did.
always down to like take another one just for like just to say fuck it, like TSM's gonna be TSM, so they're gonna lose or some shit like that.
It is more respectable to go for the upset rather than just go for the favorite every time. I say that and watch me go for the favorite in every single game. But let's go one by one. Let's get her going.
Okay, first one TSM.
I'm gonna go 100 Thieves.
Next up I'll get Team Liquid.
Team Liquid.
C9.
Cloud9.
Yeah. We should mention TL is playing CLG.
Yeah, we should do the
Yeah,
because
yeah.
people are
Yeah,
listening.
yeah,
Let's
true.
start this over again. Game 1 is 100 Thieves versus TSM. JNT is taking TSM. Blue Jays taking 100 Thieves. Next up, we got CLG versus Team Liquid. I'm
We both
taking
get
Team Liquid.
CL.
He's taking Team Liquid.
Okay, C9 EG, we're both taking C9. Dignitas
Yep.
versus FlyQuest, I'm going to take FlyQuest.
Me too.
Golden Guardians versus CLG. This could be a battle for last place.
I don't think it will be. I'm going CLG. I think they got the better squad, and I think, you know what though, like this would be the time to pull upsets, right?
Yeah.
While there is not a lot of synergy built, like if you're Golden Guardians, this is your chance to strike because there's no expectations on your shoulders. With that said, I'm still taking CLG. I just think they got the better roster.
I'll take CLG as well.
Okay, next up.
Evil Geniuses versus Immortals, I got EG.
Yep, same. Next.
TSM versus Golden Guardians, I got TSM.
Yes, me too.
C9 versus FlyQuest, I got C9.
C9.
Immortals versus Dignitas, I'm going to take Immortals.
I am going to take. Who do I want to take for this one? Yeah, honestly, I think I'm going with the Xerxes on this one. I'm going Immortals.
Yeah, that was pretty much my like.
Yep.
That was my reasoning
got the better
too.
jungler.
CLG versus 100 Thieves, I will take 100 Thieves.
Yep, same there.
Immortals versus C9, I will take C9.
Yes, same.
Team Liquid versus 100T, I will take Team Liquid.
I am going to take. I'm going to take 100 Thieves on that one.
Okay. Dignitas versus EG, I'll take EG.
I'll take an upset. There you go. You can't get mad at me for not taking upsets now. Evil Geniuses.
TSM versus CLG. I'll take TSM.
TSM.
And Team Liquid versus Golden Guardians. I will take Team Liquid.
Team Liquid. Okay,
Yeah,
so
it
pretty
seems
much
like
the only ones that, the only difference we had was where I would take 100 Thieves a little bit more, right? That's
yeah.
it?
Oh yeah, wow.
Okay.
I have 100 Thieves going 0-2 or 1-2 actually then.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, they're playing good teams. It's
yeah,
not
it
like
kind of seems like the more like bigger matchups are like not in this first like week. Like we don't see like a C9 versus a 100 Thieves, TSM or TL. We don't see like a TSM versus TL. We get to see 100 Thieves, which is good. Like we'll kind of get some answers on that roster pretty quickly.
yeah.
But the big boys are saved for later.
Yeah. It feels so weird to predict 100 Thieves against these guys that I kind of put a little bit higher in power rankings, like Liquid, at least for sure, or rather not power rankings, but in the tier list. But I don't know. I feel like it's like you said before, it's more fun to take some upsets. So what the hell? I think that they've got some synergy there, and let's go with an upset to start her off.
All right, we're gonna move on to our Popoff and Beansoup. Shout out our boy Sketcher. I know we gave him another shout out, but you get double shout out this time.
Sketcher always getting the shout outs from us. All right. Popping off, I got Broxa. For those that don't know, Broxa's been very vocal lately about how the toxicity needs to stop in the league. Those of you that listen a lot know I fucking hate toxicity, man. I'm so done with it. And I think that some of these pro players literally just get abused in their DMs. And it takes a lot to stand up to that because I know that when he says stuff like that, he's going to be targeted more and more by haters and stuff like that. He's just going to get a shit ton of DMs that say just, I don't know, stupid shit and a bunch of flame. So I'm giving props to Broxa for being the guy that's going to take the brunt of the hit and kind of just standing up and saying, look, this has got to stop. So I'm pretty happy for Broxa. I'm a huge fan of his for being an advocate for the other players in the league. He's come around and said, like, the flame that Ika got last year was just like not reasonable. And you and I have talked about this, JNT, that like if we're sitting around and someone fucks up, there's nothing wrong with you and I being like, that guy fucking sucks. Or, like there's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to you're actually just DMing someone just to make them feel bad, you're crossing the line. We
Yeah.
know that these players open up themselves to criticism, and there's nothing wrong with you having your opinion on whether a player is good or bad and saying it however you want. But there is no need to go into a player's DMs and just throw hate their way. And I think that's where the line's got to be drawn. So yeah, that huge to Broxa popping off. Poggers for him.
Yeah, for my Popoff, I went with the new LCS format. Like we already talked about it before, but I think they
Let's
made a
go,
lot
baby.
of positive changes, helping to eliminate the sort of stigma of spring split doesn't matter. And I think the changes overall will make the season much more exciting as each game really does matter.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. Nothing else to say there. Bean soup. I am pissed off, JNT. Tell everyone why I'm pissed off. I think you know this.
Oh yeah, the jerseys and everything.
Yes. So for those that don't know yet, I want to buy some new jerseys. I'm hella hyped for the 2021 jerseys to come out, and they don't come out before Christmas. How do you miss out on that opportunity? So many people will buy them as gifts. You need to release these things before Christmas. For those that don't know, TSM actually announced them today, though, as today being Monday, January 11th, as we're recording this. So there are some jerseys that are starting to come out, and some brands like Dignitas released some sweaters and stuff like that. Not a jersey yet for Dignitas yet. So teams are starting to come out with that stuff. But I just think it's freaking bean soup that it takes them this long to release this stuff. There are so many people that want to give you money. This is your opportunity. Make some money. Come out with these things December 1st. Even like all like the like cars will come out the year like 4 or 5 months before the year. There's like what else? There's like even video games like Madden whatever will come out like 4 or 5 months before the actual year comes out. Like there's a reason why people do this. It's because the holiday season is when you make money. The LCS orgs need to start making money. The jerseys, I'm sure, have to have a significant amount of cash flow. And I'm done ranting about this. Come out with your damn jerseys earlier. Well,
I agree.
okay.
I don't know. I don't got too much. Like I got a C9 jersey. That's all I need.
Okay, what's your bean soup?
For Bean Soup, I got season 10 of League of Legends. Like, holy moly. Felt so bad to play sometimes. Like, the ranked environment was terrible. All the new champions they're releasing, the direction they're taking the game is horrible. Right? Literally came
JNT's
out.
taking his
Dude,
what's his face? You're on the stairs. You're
like,
Void Boy on the
it's
stairs.
not even that. It was just like the way that like they're taking the direction of the game. Like, they literally came out with a statement like earlier or like a week ago saying that they think that all this healing that they're adding into the game is like should be embraced and is a good part. And like, I'm sorry, but if I'm playing a healing champion and I can press Gore Drinker and heal my entire HP bar, I know the item just got nerfed. But if I'm playing a champion with like Ravenous Hunter, Gore Drinker, and a lifesteal item, I'm playing Samira who can press R multiple times in a team fight, which doesn't make any sense. Every single new champion they're releasing is busted. Like, I could go on and on and on, but man, it's just a sad time for playing
Here's
League of
what I'd say,
Legends.
because I understand your frustration, but I would say give it more time, because when you come out with all those changes for new items and stuff like that, there's a lot of time that's needed for it to be balanced. And so I guess I'm just saying, hopefully by this time next year, your bean soup won't be season 11 changes. But
Oh,
anyways, yeah,
I think the item changes they made are pretty decent. Like, they messed up pretty badly with a couple items, but like after
I
some
think they'll
initial
balance it
fixes,
out.
no, I think the item changes
Yeah.
were all right. Like, overall, in terms of like the whole revamp, like I've seen worse, so it's all right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, is that it for this episode, or is there more?
Uh,
No, we got some quick news, right?
Yeah,
Just
I
a
got
little
some
thing.
quick news. Just two quick things. If you're, really looking for, if you really can't wait until Friday to look at some League of Legends content, the LPL and the LCK have started. They are underway already with their spring regular seasons. They had a rematch of the LPL finals between Top Esports and Suning. I won't spoil it if you want to go watch it. The LCK does start up Wednesday morning, I believe. So that's like Wednesday at like 3 a.m. But the LPL is pretty much R&D finished week one, I believe. So if you're looking out for any else or any league gameplay, like pro gameplay before Friday, check out some YouTube VODs on that maybe.
Yeah, man. Professional league is underway. We've already started. The LCS hasn't, but some of the other regions have, so that's hella hype.
And
And
lastly, some more like kind of Twitch related news as we are streaming on Twitch. PogChamp got removed from
yeah.
Twitch TV. No more PogChamp. Well, like the face of PogChamp, but like now that like they added this really gimmicky thing in the other day where like the PogChamp is just gonna be like a different face every 24 hours until they like figure it out.
Oh, is
And
that
it's
how that's working? I didn't know that. Okay.
yeah, so it's gonna be like a different face every 24 hours, but no more
Yeah.
PogChamp.
We're not gonna dive into the reasons, because it's politically what's the word? Influenced. So we're not going to dive into that, but if you want to have a quick Google, you could figure out exactly why PogChamp is no longer the same. But I think that's just about it. Is there anything else that you wanted to throw out before we shut her down?
Nope.
Yeah, just a few shout outs, guys. If you've noticed, we have a new brand. We rebranded over the last couple of months, over the off season, and we have a new logo, new stream layout. We have a few new assets on our YouTube and whatnot, so be sure to go check that out. And the credit all has to go to a friend of mine, Jeff. Jeff has put in a lot of time, guys, in the off season, and I couldn't give a bigger shout out how much we value his time and work that he's done, because pretty much everything that you guys see, while JNT and myself were involved in the decision making, it was our friend Jeff that really put in all the time to actually make all of these assets. And so we're extraordinarily happy with it. So a huge shout out to him. JNT and I want to continue to do this every week. And for now, we see no plans of changing that. Every Monday, 9 p.m. EST, will be live on Twitch. And then, as per usual, the VOD will be uploaded right back onto YouTube. So, I mean, if you're listening on YouTube, you can expect it every Monday night or early Tuesday morning. I would expect Monday night. That's usually what we're going to have, and we're going to try to do it with more timestamps. We know a lot of you guys have been asking for timestamps, and we are also looking for your guys' support. We did start a Patreon for those that do want to support us. That would be absolutely so much appreciated, because we want to do this full time, right? I've mentioned that time and time again. This is what we want to do, and we're hoping that for those of you that really enjoy our content will support us. And for those that do, thanks so much. We got guys that come back every single week Some people are here even during the audio test. We have people pop up in chat and are ready to come join the live chat. So thank you so much to everyone that does that. I can't even begin to tell you how much we appreciate all the support from everyone. It's been fucking awesome.
Yeah, we did a lot of, as a collective, us with Jeff, we did a lot of work over the off season just to sort of improve the look and improve things moving forward. And that's what we're trying to do. If anybody was ever watching that like first episode that we ever uploaded on YouTube, like myself, I still hadn't even gotten like a nice quality mic to use. I was using a little headset microphone. We're trying to up the quality of this thing. Slowly but surely it is happening. But, we really appreciate all your guys' support.
And feedback, right?
Yeah.
We need your guys' feedback too. We need to know what you guys like and dislike. It helps us a lot. So
yeah, just anything as small as just coming to the live stream and just saying what's up, or just like chatting or leaving a YouTube comment or liking the video or anything like that. Like, it matters. Like, we really appreciate it.
Yep. So with that said, this has been episode 25 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. We expect to have many more, and thanks again for showing up, guys. We will see you guys next week.
Later.